Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third instalment of Diary of a Property Investor. Jim, we're following your journey. Part 3. I think, where did we leave off last week with you? You and Perry had done part 2.
Okay, so let's talk about part 1 and part 2. Now, this is the Diary of a Property Investor. This is where I am right now. This is how I managed to meet my first million. Yep. This is what this is all about in this series that we're doing right now. This is kind of a precursor to the book. There's a lot of information here, and once we get this right, I'll distill a lot of it down and put it into a book format so it's actually understandable and readable. So we're going to be mulling out. It's kind of like the comedy clubs, Richard, where, you know, like for example, Peter Kay starts off in the local comedy club. He does some sketches and he goes, oh, well, that doesn't go down well. It's like, that went down well. We'll tick that box. And then he gets to that stage where he gets a refined one, and then he goes up to the second part, and then he runs it again, maybe at a festival. Therefore, and everybody goes, oh, that, and he goes, oh, that didn't go down well with a bigger audience, and he leaves that one out. And then he gets the distilled information until he gets the right product, and then he's on a massive stage, and everybody goes, that's fantastic. And folk didn't realise all the preparation that's going on beforehand to get it to that stage. So I kind of think, you know, I've got most of it in my head, and I need to get it out in sort of this format. Plus, as well, one of the things for me is I don't have a clue about my dad and what he did. And I kind of think I would have loved him to put a diary together, something like this, to say, you know, what he experienced and how he experienced. So this is kind of why I'm doing it as well, for later on. My children might want to watch it, fair enough. They might want to listen to the podcast or whatever later on, but I just want to put something down. I also want to give people hope. For God's sake, if I could do this, any idiot can do this, really. Because at that time, where I came from and how all the trauma that I actually, baggage that I took on with me, I'm actually surprised that I managed to do anything like this at all. But this is the journey. This is how it happened. And for some people out there that are going through the same things as me when they did at primary school and at secondary school in my last 2 series we've done in part 1 and part 2, then they'll probably understand that and relate to that as well. But what's happened in part 3 is what we're happening now is this is me bringing a lot of unresolved baggage from my primary school years and from my secondary school years as well. A lot of unresolved baggage, which manifests itself later on in the fact that no clear direction, disruptive, not towing the line, bitter and angry about everything at this point in time in my teenage years, but no clear direction either, because I had no idea where I was going and what I was doing. I was so much so that I actually forgot to mention last week, I was actually asked to leave school. I never got a choice where I was getting on to stay on for my braid. So everybody got to be a prefect when they went into 6th year. At the end of 5th year, I was just basically taken aside from the deputy head and said, don't bother applying for 6th year. Don't even bother applying for your braid to be a prefect, because you'll be the only person in the whole history of the school ever that will never even get a trial for a prefect either, or a probationary period. You will just not get to be a prefect. You'll be the only person walking about with no braid, no prefect at all, and it will be an embarrassment for you. And that's basically what I was told. Great introduction, isn't it?
I think, like you say, Jim, I think with most things, it's all about trial and error. And as you used as an analogy there, the comedy club, like people might look at, say, Peter Kay, for instance, he just stands up there and does the show, and they must think that's easy, you could do that. But it's the whole journey and the trial and error to get there. And it's the same with you, obviously. People may look and think, oh, Jim's really successful. He done that quite easily. But obviously, this is what you're putting this together to kind of explain your journey, how your trial and errors have come about to get you to where you are. And it's quite a good thing to have that diary to look back on, like you say, for your kids. I've got a couple of good mornings. Good morning, Linda. Thanks for joining. She just reminded us there, happy birthday, Jim. I forgot about that. I did say happy birthday to you this morning, but I just forgot to mention it.
It's just another day, to be honest. It's just another day. That's it. Stop, for God's sake, stop wishing me a happy birthday. It's just another day. Let's move on.
And Perry's joining us this morning as well. Thanks for joining, Perry.
It's nice. Jim, it's nice, but it's not necessary. Don't worry about it.
So you left off last week. You're saying, obviously, episode 1, we've done your trip through your primary school years and things. You done secondary school with Perry last week. And we've got to that point, like you just said, when you got to that point of possibly being 6-year prefect and things, but that didn't transpire. So that's where we're going to pick up today.
So kicked out of school, For want of a better phrase, PTSD is following with me, because there's a huge amount of unresolved issues there, and it does happen for a lot of children today. Most of the children that come out of school in this similar situation have unresolved issues which haven't been dealt with at school, and therefore that's why they become disruptive, because of that reason. I actually heard a psychologist actually say recently that things like ADSD and ADHD and whatever it is, he says it's not a product of your physical being, it's a product of your mental resource. It's actually a mental trauma that causes this problem.
So it's not a genetic thing or a hereditary
thing.
I
kind of think, I wonder if that's that. I could buy into that actually on a superficial level without the full understanding, because kind of that's where I was. It was kind of that PTSD. School was never wired up for me. No real qualifications at this point in time, no real direction. Automatically fell into a job with my father because there was no other option for me, or nobody had actually discussed options with me, or maybe somebody did try to discuss options with me, and that was called a guidance counsellor. But guidance counsellor was dealing with hundreds of pupils while actually maintaining their full-time job as a teacher. How on earth are you meant to guide anybody?
It's a big undertaking.
Yeah, it's a huge, and it's like they're only going to catch the people that are in irrelevance, and they're not going to catch the people that fall through the net. And this is basically what's happened to me. I've fallen through the net. You know, it's the end of the road for me. You're out of school, done, no direction, nothing. I literally fell into working with my dad as a window cleaner, and that was my life ultimately for the next probably the next 2 or 3 years. Fast forward, July 1988. 21 years old, everything's going my way. I'm actually feeling amazing at this point in time. Sun's shining, life is good. And I've actually found a wee bit of purpose because my dad teaches me how to run the business, and we're a wee bit loggerheads now and again. I'm a bit, as people know, I'm a bit like dogmatic and autocratic. I actually like my own way. I like to be a leader. But I tell you a couple of things in between there, which actually resonated with me. Property investment. I remember watching the Cook report, and it was a horrific report about private landlords in London renting property to people, and more or less slum landlords, and their attitude towards the tenants as well. But this was only when I was about 17, when I was at school. I saw this report, and I was appalled at that time. But you know, the thing that resonated for me was these people were getting £1,000 a month, and they were letting their tenants live in with cockroaches and damp and all the rest of it. And I thought, my God, £1,000 a month to rent a property to someone, that would be a really good income. Imagine if you were able to do that properly. And that was as far as I got in terms of that thinking. I never thought anything else. I never thought I'm going to do property investment at that age. I just thought that would be a really good idea if you got it right to actually do something like that. And it kind of fell in line with the fact that I don't know what it was, but my favourite game when I was younger was Monopoly. And it took me years and years and years of practice at Monopoly to actually start winning it all the time. And I knew the way to win Monopoly every single time was buy everything on the board straight away. Because
do you think that's where, like you say, the realisation and the seed kind of planted with the whole property investing, and that's where your journey down that route kind of started?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to do with the game Monopoly and how the fact that it was all about buying and putting hotels on and building houses on things and understanding that concept. Now, funny enough, actually, Robert Kiyosaki takes that one step further and does the cash flow game, which is basically an extension of Monopoly, but instead of dealing with houses as well, it deals with life, with having children, with losing your job and stuff like that as well. So it's a similar, it's an extra onto that, and that is still completely relevant to today. So, you know, that's kind of where I had it. So life is good at this point in time because I've now thought, this is me, this is my lot in life. I still was very cynical about everything. I used to see books on the shelf. It used to be about teaching you how to be a millionaire. And my cynical approach to this was, you're going to be a millionaire because what you do is you write a book on how to become a millionaire and sell it to everybody. And as a result, you become a millionaire. Funny enough, that's like some gurus or furus, I would say, with their courses. They become millionaires because they sell courses. That is not decrying everybody that sells courses, by the way. I know there's one lady on here that actually we just mentioned previously who's absolutely fantastic at actually refurbing and turning around and property flipping. So That is nothing.
And passing on her knowledge,
people
like
out
what
there
you
are
do.
genuinely really good at this, and I would say do your due diligence for that. That's one thing I've learned. So, 21 years old. Actually, at the 21 years old mark, this is where I met the most beautiful woman in the world. Her name was Elaine, actually, and I knew I was going to marry her, but at that point, she didn't know I was going to marry her.
I was just going to say, did she know that?
She had no idea. No. Punching well above my station. However, when the dream's big enough, the facts don't count, do they?
Yeah.
Still working for my father as an industrial cleaner. At that point in time, I'd upgraded from a window cleaner to industrial cleaner. We're cleaning shops, we're cleaning post offices, and we were doing the internals and outsides. I think we'd moved into the golf clubs as well and doing them as well. So we'd moved the business on a wee bit. And there was plans obviously afoot at some point in time that I would end up taking over the business with my brother. Life doesn't get much better than that when you've kind of got it sussed and you know where you're going at that point in time. But what I didn't know at that point in time is someone else had other plans for me, and my path was about to change forever. Now, this happened one night at the golf club. Well, you know the kind of place, the air smells, the musky smells of cigarettes, carpets weren't quite right, the alcohol smell all the time, musty furniture, and the person that's going to change my life forever sitting across the table from me at this point in time. I mean, I always looked up to him and I always played second fiddle to him. And whenever challenged by this person, I would always back down because I knew he would take no prisoners. This is the time when his jealousy gets the better of him. He begins to pick on me while he's drunk because he sees I've got it all made. And at this point in time, this person doesn't have it all made. And I casually tell him he's out of order because he starts picking on Elaine at this point in time. And here it comes. The fists start flying in the air through my direction. And it hits me in the face at this point in time. And then that's when all I remember, my mind just goes blank. I've never taken a stand against this person in my life. And you know the feeling, probably yourself, when you've got to that point where enough's enough, I'm just not going to take it anymore.
Break him.
And it's almost like somebody takes over your body and it just goes for it. Your chimp in your mind, just the emotional response just is right in there straight away. The next minute, I'm actually being dragged off him, and he's dragged out the room. And as I begin to realise what has happened, all I can hear is the panic all around as this person shouts to me, "I'm going to kill you." Now, at this point in time, I'm shitting it, genuinely, because I know he doesn't. He really means this. I'm sitting in the chair, trembling with fear. My head's in my hands, wondering what the repercussions would be. He's never backed down before, and he would rather fight to the death and lose, this person. It's the first time in my life I've actually stood up to him, and literally I'm terrified of the repercussions, as I've said. In this situation, anyone else would just steer clear of him until it blows over. But what you don't know, it's my brother. We both live in the same house. And we both work together in the same business. He's my boss. I'm devastated. Now, what do I do now? How can I go on? Life will never be the same. Fear kicks in at this point in time, and I'm left with no choice but to leave the home and my job. And that night, one fell swoop, that was it done. Homeless, unemployed, just like that. How could that happen? And why did it happen to me? That's what I asked myself at that point in time. I can't believe this one event had control, and I had no control over it. And it has left me with nothing. At this point in time, everything is actually gone. What will I do now? Where will I go? Who will help me? See the embarrassment you have at the age of 21, with having nothing and nowhere else to go, no skills, no income, and no home. Could it get any worse? Have you ever felt vulnerable? That's what I would ask other people out there. Have you ever felt no control of your life? Other people were in charge of what you did and how it worked out for you. That's how I felt at that point in time. This is one of the key points in my life, Richard, that I've vowed never to have this happen to me ever again. See how this building in this profile, think I'm going to be in control in the future. I'm going to make sure that no one ever is going to control me ever again. And this is setting me on the path in my mind, in my mindset. I didn't know at this point in time how I was going to do that, but I just vowed to myself I would never let that happen ever again. I'll need to do something about it. At that point, though, it was all about survival. Homeless, unemployed. I had Elaine, my girlfriend at that point in time. She managed to get me into the room. She managed to get my room with her mum and dad at that point in time. But after a couple of weeks, that wasn't really working out because I was getting under her dad's feet. And being there all the time, I had to move all the time, and I had to move on. So after a couple of weeks, that was me back in there, basically couch surfing. Every time reinforcing to me that I need some sort of security in my life. This won't happen again. I would never need to worry, but at this point, I had no idea what that's going to be. So there I am, no idea what to do next, no skills, no income, no home, couch surfing at the places, and sooner or later, they didn't want me there as I was cramping their style, and I had to find my own place. I remember getting a council house. I actually remember getting a council house, and I actually had to hand back the keys because I couldn't afford to furnish it.
Yeah, okay.
I was just like, there's a council house to you, no carpets, no white goods, no furniture. And I've got no job, I've got no income. So I can't live in it. I can't even pay the bills for anything. So there was no help at that point in time either. So I just had to hand back the keys.
Could I just listening, Jim, not to bring you off track, but just as you see, obviously, people listening will find themselves in maybe similar situations, and I think the important thing that I took for that, and something that you've taught me as well, is when you're in a situation or find yourself in circumstances, is always to question the how and the why. Like how you say, how did I get here? Why is it happening to me?
Yeah.
And to kind of analyze it for that perspective. Do you think that looking at it and thinking about it like that helped you move forward?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there was one big driving force in my life at that point in time, and it was Elaine.
Yeah.
I think I would have been probably in jail or dead by now if it wasn't for Elaine, to be honest. Yeah. I'll genuinely say that. You know, I would probably be in jail or be dead or one or the other. You know, it would never have panned out right for me. It somehow gave me purpose to drive forward, to have someone else with me. And it's vital out there for other people as well, as you have to. This is what we talked about. Somebody was on social media the other night saying, you know, I always say your partner can either build you up or tear you down. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, if they build you up, you'll be the wealthiest person in the world. But if they tear you down, they'll be the poorest person in the world as well, because they don't realize they're doing it. You could be the most successful person in the world, marry the wrong partner, and you'll probably have nothing left at the end of it because of that person, because they've changed the way you think. So it's important to make sure you've got that right person on the journey with you. Yeah. Elaine and I tried so many times to get private lets, but we were so young and no one wanted to actually take the risk with us. I mean, we were 21 almost, you know, at that time. That sounds daft, to think it's like, I mean, I let to people younger than that, and I don't see any problem with that at all. But to have people constantly reject us, and yet at that time as well, Elaine had her job. So why on earth would you not be able to get a private let? But they just kept leaving us out, and I don't know why that was, because we were respectable, we looked after everything, we were clean and tidy and all the rest of it. Elaine had a job, we had a car, so I don't see any reason why that wasn't possible. But I suppose it's for people out there, have you ever experienced when people don't trust you enough to know deep down that you'll do the right thing? And your word is your bond, but they still don't give you a chance. I mean, it's totally crushing. But eventually we did find a place, a private let, which gave us some stability. And it was around that time I saw an advert for a local college. So the local college, incidentally, we were with Elaine's auntie as well. And then she, at some point in time, after going there, said, should you get a job by now and all the rest of it? It's like, I'm still trying to work out what I'm doing and get on my feet. Never mind, so it was almost like somebody else having a go at me and say, well, you can't stay here if you've not got a job. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, can you not just give me some time to actually sort this out? So it is that process, and I understand that process. And it's like that with my boys and Tony as well now as well. I'm very, very tolerant of their situation because I understand what it was like when I was younger. and
you need time to find your path and what route you're going to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But old school suggests that you should always get a job every single time, no matter what it is. And sometimes that's not the best course of action at that point in time, because it's almost like going out the frying pan into the fire. But old school thinks like that. That's how they did. It was just survival at that point in time for them. So that's where I was at that point in time. So I saw the advert for the local college. Nurse certificate in computer studies was the one for me. I actually got in at the last minute. It was Jack Gray, I think it was, actually allowed me to get in at the last minute. So Jack actually allowed me to get in at the last minute in terms of the local college into computer and business studies. I was quite surprised. He said, "You're a mature student." And I'm like, what? I'm only about in my early 20s. How could I be a mature student? But he says, no, we'll let you in. And the good thing was I'd actually worked before. So the great thing about working before was if you'd had 3 years of national insurance, they actually paid your college course for you. I know education's free at that time, but they paid your college course for you, and you actually got access to a bursary, which was a wee bit of support for travel costs. So I managed to get access to that as well. But one of the things I actually learned was when it came to things like council tax and that, what they actually said to me is like, you're not available for full-time work anymore, therefore we'll not give you benefits anymore, therefore you'll have to pay more or less all your council tax yourself, or whatever that was at the time, the rates for the house that you're in, that you're renting, and you don't get any subsidies. And I goes, but I'm actually on a low income, and at college I actually try to better myself. Surely that should give me some more help than somebody that's actually on the dole. And they went, no, you have to pay more than the person on the dole. That's
crazy. Yeah?
That's mental, and I'm sure that's still like that today. And the fact that you're not available for full-time work because you're in full-time education, but they don't give you actually the support that they would actually give you if you're actually on the dole and not actually working at all.
Yeah, I think if you're in full-time education and on your own, you'll get your discount and things.
But you don't actually get as much discount as you would if you were actually completely unemployed.
Yeah.
Work that one out. You're better off being unemployed in that situation. However, you get yourself caught into a poverty trap if you're like that.
I know.
I never wanted to get caught in the poverty trap. I had no idea about the National Certificate in Business and Computer Studies, by the way, because I'd never learned anything in years. And I remember when I went for interviews in between for things like the RAF. I got to the third interview in the RAF, the final interview. The commanding officer at that time, before I went on this course, actually said to me, "I'm not going to accept you, even though you're the perfect candidate for the RAF, because you've not even discussed it with your partner, because she has no idea what this is all about, and we're not in the habit of breaking people up." Yeah. Thank God for that commanding officer. I never got into the RAF, because I wouldn't be where I am right now. So I could take my hat off to that boy for no actually letting me in and actually letting me go on to being qualified and going up my qualifications. Remember when you do fractions and stuff like that, I had no idea how to do fractions anymore. I had no idea how to do anything. Everything I'd learned at school, I'd actually lost anything of that at all. Because after about 3 years of education, if you leave it for 3 years and you don't keep studying that, then it disappears from you completely. You forget about it. You're maybe capable of learning again, but all that stuff you've learned is now gone. This is how about continuous education, how it's so important when you're a letting agent, when you're an estate agent, when you're actually a property investor, when you're anything like that. You keep abreast of that. You can't just sit in your laurels and expect it to happen. So I had no real qualifications at that point in time going into this. I was fearful that I wasn't good enough. How would we survive? I've covered that. And I went to college, and you weren't available for full-time work. You didn't get any help or anything like that. No help to pay your rent. No help to feed or clothe yourself. You know yourself, you don't get help to pay your rent if you're a student. You sometimes have access to a fund that will pay you maybe £200, but it'll certainly not pay your rent. So you're out on a limb and you're left to fend for yourself. That can't be a sustainable system for our education, especially if you've got to help somebody get on that. And that is for me in hindsight now, when I look at that, think about the amount of people that actually could have been successful at what they did, but they weren't given the chance because of the funding available.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's things, you get SAS grants and things now as well. But it's still not going to help you in the grand scheme of things if when you add everything up.
So here we are right now, Richard. Picture yourself sitting around the gas fire, not able to afford to actually put the fire on, and your only luxury, and I really mean this when I say my only luxury, was actually having steak sausages with our beans and chips. That's how difficult it was. We had beans and chips most of the time because it was, carbs and protein at that point, but we never knew anything about that. We just knew beans and chips were good and it was sustainable. It kept you going. Finder's crispy pancakes now and again as well, which you got from, the local farm foods or whatever it was at that time. But literally, if you were having meat and stuff like that, it was a real luxury at that point because you'd really had no money to that at all. You also have to bear in mind that, at this point in time as well, I've still continually been told by my peers, what makes you think you're so special? And that's no for the likes of us. And you don't get ideas above your station. So at that point, my entrepreneurial spirit had been knocked truly and cleanly out of me. And that's why I had all these reservations when I went into college. For the first time, I was completely terrified. But as you know, when the dream's big enough, the facts don't count. So I felt the fear, did it anyway, applied for college and got accepted. Mature student. I had a direction now because I was accepted. And it was really, I had to succeed. This was all or nothing at this point in time. Because this was my last ditch attempt. I've been accepted to college to do a computer and business studies national certificate. And it was Monte Carlo or bust as far as I'm concerned. Now, you've heard that phrase before, but this is the phrase I took from that point in time. This is all or nothing, all in. This is no turning back now. You have to succeed. I remember my mother and father actually saying to me, I think you're making a big mistake when I actually left the house. When I left my job and left the house that night, I think you're making a big mistake. It's not going to work out. Real encouragement. They're only doing their best when you think about it at that point in time, but hopefully people out there will learn from that, what I see as a mistake, to learn for their children, to understand them and understand where they're coming from and get a bit of experience about what my experience was like at that age as well and how I felt in their position. Mm-hmm. So it's Monte Carlo or bust. 3 years of disciplining myself consistently to study every opportunity. And this is all about sacrifice at this point. Sacrificing holidays, sacrificing nights out, not being able to buy nice things. I came out of college, and in between as well, actually, before I say I came out of college, what I came out of college with, in between there, I remember I used to take my study books to everywhere. We used to go out to the bingo now and again on a Sunday night, and I would actually take my study books with me to actually study in that half an hour in between the first session and the second session. While everybody else enjoyed themselves and talked, I just sat and studied for half an hour. On birthdays, I sat and studied. On Christmas Day, I sat and studied. On New Year's Day and New Year's night, I sat and studied for the next 3 years consistently. The first year was National Certificate in Business and Computer Studies. The next year after that was a national diploma, a higher national diploma in accountancy. Now, the great thing about National Certificate was it allowed me to introduce me to business studies, accountancy, and computer studies. And then from there, I applied for these 3 higher national diplomas in these 3 disciplines. And what I found at that point in time is I excelled in accountancy. Now, think about this. How could somebody excel in accountancy and yet fail it miserably at high school and not even get a mention in the O grade or even the higher? And yet at this point in time, I came out as the top student in National Certificate Computer and Business Studies of my year for that very reason. I had distinction in everything. Now, distinction is 90% or more in every single course, every single thing. So see how that focus and discipline has now applied later on in my life.
Yeah.
And then the next after that, the accountancy, I actually came out and won what was the Carter Cup at that point in time, sponsored by Carter's, the accountants, who are now another company because Carter's don't exist anymore. But I came out as the top student in accountancy with a higher national diploma as well. Again, what does that tell me? It's like, how is it possible that you can come from school and yet excel in it from there? What does that say about the school system and how that operates?
I was just going to say, do you think that's you think it's down to the teaching, the way that you were taught, or do you think it's your mindset, or do you think it's a combination of both? Or
combination of everything, Richard. Point of readiness. I was ready for it at that point in time. I had purpose. I was driven now because I was with someone else. I was with Elaine. So I had purpose. We had a dream together, and I wanted to make it happen. Every single time I used to say, well, this is going to be this is going to be like this is going to be like that. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I used to talk about where I was going, how I was doing it. This was way before goal setting, way before books and tapes and functions and all the rest of it. This came later on. But I had this driven in my mind all the time about where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a qualified accountant. I thought at that point in time, I mean, let's just recap. I felt on top of the world, being the best student 3 times, remember. The third time was also when the ACCA professional exams. I ended up being their top student as well.
Yeah.
So again, top student again. I even got married at that time. This was quite a funny one. I found out on my tax course that it was advantageous to be actually married because you were getting an extra £500 a year as a married man at that time. So I immediately ran home to Elaine, the old charmer that I am, and said, wait a minute, we're getting 500 quid if we're married every single year in our hand. Does that not make sense? We've been living together for about 3 or 4 years. Let's just get married. So literally we were married within 2 weeks. Everybody thought, you must be pregnant. And it's like, no, me, by the way, Elaine. And it's like everybody was asking her, and it's like, no, we're just getting married. We just want to get married in 2 weeks. That's it, done and dusted, out of the way. So that was a lesson in itself. It showed me if you wanted something bad enough, you'd find a way to make it happen. So I remember when I chose accountancy, I knew it would be the path to a better job, probably respect, approval from my mother. Oh my God, is that not a big thing? Eh?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, if you're doing it for your mother or your father, for God's sake, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Because I'll tell you what, you'll never be happy. Because and plus the fact, it will stop you from making decisions that you should make, which are beneficial for you, all because you feel that you'll upset your mother or your father because you're doing it for them.
Continually trying to live up to their expectation rather than.
It is. Yeah. You'll never live up to that expectation. For God's sake, don't even attempt it. Do it for you. Don't do it for anybody else, because when you follow it with anybody else, you'll stop doing what you're doing. Do it for you, have your plan goal, where you want to be, and you know the people you're going to take with you. This was my path to a millionaire. Being an accountant. Really? Now I could say really.
Yeah.
But at that time, it's like, really? I really thought that this was going to take me to be a millionaire, to this path of being an accountant.
So then, do you not think that it was part? I mean, it's obviously part of your journey.
Well,
do you feel it was a necessary part now, or
let's fast forward to 1993. I'm 26-year-old, working as a trainee accountant, driving my own desk in a manufacturing company. Yep, my very own desk. I don't know about how you felt about having your own desk, but I took great pride in the fact that I had my own desk for the first time. I felt brilliant. I felt on top of the world. We bought our own house after renting before, finally away from the landlord. We actually we had a ton of money at that time, literally doing nothing else, because we did everything. We did all the repairs and improvements. This person never even looked after us at all. I actually had to fix everything. It's like they just took no responsibility for anything. Yeah. And I thought, wait a minute, that's not what a landlord's meant to do. See the message hitting home here about the fact that, the amount of money it's actually getting. Now, it suited our purpose at that time, remember. So let's not decry landlords for that reason. But it actually planted another seed in me. But it didn't stick with me because literally someone else stole my dream. I remember talking about renting property to a next door neighbour. Don't let anybody else steal your dream, by the way. This is important, mate. And I actually respected this person. This is because with the first house we bought in Durwood Street. And I actually respected this person because he was high up in the council. And the first thing he went to me when I said about renting property and maybe there's money in it, he said, no, you didn't want to do that. I rented the property a wee while ago and it all went pear-shaped and it got wrecked and all the rest of it and I got rid of it and you'll lose money. And I thought, okay, I'll bury that down deep then. Because I respected this person.
And trusted
what I didn't realise, I was so naive that I didn't realise the fact to check what actually he was and where he was. Now, in hindsight, now, I'm taught to look at someone and say, well, is that person, he or she, got what you want in life? If the answer to that is no, then don't listen to them.
Yeah.
Because they've got nothing to tell you to get you where they are, because they can't teach you. This is like you asking to learn how to be a doctor from a joiner.
Yeah.
That's not going to be possible. So the only way you'll learn how to be rich is from somebody else that's rich already and what you want to be rich in. If you want to be rich in friends, find out somebody who's got a lot of friends and find out what they did and how they interact with people. If you want to be rich in money, find out somebody who makes a lot of money and do what they do. If you want to be wealthy, find out somebody that's wealthy and find out how they do it and what they do, and you'll be wealthy as well. So literally do nothing else. But I thought I'll stick with it because it's me. So it's October the 17th, 1993. This is it. This is another pinnacle point in my life, Richard. All around me, gas and air canisters, people rushing about, an unusual and unique smell in the area. You probably could tell where I am at this point in time. The place is sterile, and she's on her way. This is the first time I heard the cries of my daughter, Tony. This was a pinnacle point for me.
Yeah.
I remember Elaine had left the room at this point in time, and I held her in my arms for the very first time. And actually said, I will look after you for your whole life, and I will make sure you want for nothing. And I'll always love her, no matter what she does and who she is, for who she is, not what she does. And that's how my love was interpreted all my life. I was always loved because of what I did, not who I was.
Yeah.
Some other people out there might be thinking like that as well. And the reason for that is, and I read it the other day in a book, actually, it's the classic example when your child runs home from school and immediately you say to them, that is a fantastic drawing, let's put it on the fridge. I love that. That's not the way to do that. You should be saying, how did you get on at school today? You had a great time, fantastic, all the rest of it. And I love you regardless. Then you should go to their photo, their painting and say, what is this you've done? Tell me all about it. Oh, where are we going to put that? Let's put it on the fridge then. See the fundamental difference in that?
Yeah.
One of them is your love for what you're doing. The other one is your love for what you've done. This is what my association was, and this is how I'm hardwired. This is why I keep saying to people, I am born to serve other people. And that will never change for me. And I love doing that. You have to understand that. So that was Tony. She's on her way. I've never experienced that feeling like before. I still feel emotional thinking about that. You can just see that right now.
I was just going to say it.
Becoming
a father is obviously a pinnacle point in anybody's life. And it's obviously, you'll probably at that point the realization that it's not just, obviously you say Elaine was kind of your rock and kept you going and focused and things, but now you've got another being, somebody that's totally dependent on you guys, and that's another driving force that, like you say, will guide you through obviously your whole journey and providing for her and things as well.
One of the biggest drivers in the world, that as well. That was one of the fundamental turning points for me as well. I had to earn more money. I had to be better. I had to upgrade my salary. Yeah. And this is when it finally hit me that being an accountant wasn't going to give me the lifestyle I dreamed of for myself or my family. I was stuck earning the same salary at that time, which was as an accountant, which was 25 to 30,000 per annum, give or take. And that was 30,000 per annum at a company director level. And I got myself on the hamster wheel and the home to work routine. And you know the script, it's 5 days a week. It's live and live for the weekend. And I was literally broke at a different level at that point. And for people out there that don't understand what broke at a different level is you could be earning £100,000 and everybody would think you're seriously wealthy because you're earning £100,000, but your car you're driving is more expensive. your house you're living in, your mortgage is more expensive, your clothes and your food that you buy is more expensive, your heating bills are more expensive, your council tax is more expensive, your whole lifestyle is more expensive, and you're literally broke at a different level. You
It's
have
like
no
the whole,
money.
it's like the whole the egg and chips and steak and chips thing. Do you know what I mean? You've got more money, then you eat steak and chips, but you're spending more. Do you know what I mean? If you've got less money, you're eating egg and chips.
You've still not got enough month at the end of the money.
Yeah.
That's effectively it. Still though, I had a great skill. I had a flair in manufacturing and a reputation as a profit engineer. I literally, when I went into my career, I literally used to start a job and I used to take that whole job and minimize it in efficiency right down to half the working week.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would take another half of somebody else's job and add it onto my job. Now, that somebody else every single time was my boss or the managing director or the financial director. So I used to get huge amounts of experience of what they were doing as well. I didn't bother about that. That was a great learning curve there. That was like exactly what you did, Richard, which was become an intern to me initially in order to get the experience to get the job eventually. And that's exactly what I did with my bosses. I just said, hey, I've got more time on my hands. I've made this more efficient. If you got something else I can do, you got something else I can. I was never afraid to go back to my boss and say, I'm at a limb. I've got nothing to do. Have you got something I can do? Because I was always very confident at that point because of everything I'd done in my courses and everything I'd done and been the top student 3 years in a row. I was very confident I could just walk out and get another job somewhere else easily.
Yeah.
And our lifestyle, even at that time, had been built on one of us working only. And yet both of us were working at that point in time. I did everything, by the way, when Elaine was at work and I was a student. I did the cooking, the cleaning, the house and the ironing, everything. I didn't see anything wrong with that. At that time, it was kind of like, what, you're doing women's work? It's weird. But I just thought that's what you would normally do. I'm not going to sit at the telly all day and wait for my wife to come home from her work and then
have to do
better make my tea and do the ironing. It's like, really? It's like, I'm studying all day, fair enough, but I can still fit that in. So that was kind of my routine. But I had that great skill in manufacturing, which I became a real good profit engineer. And what I meant was I was able to look at things and actually make them more efficient just by actually adapting them and changing them and making them run better and making them yield more results, better results out of what they were getting. So I was able to do that. I got a real good reputation for that. I was able to, and I got that. My energy levels changed up a gear, and I began to become more alert of new opportunities. And it was at this point that's when the opportunity was ready and preparation met. Some of you will have it today. I was introduced to a business that could go alongside my job. This was the business that could potentially make me a millionaire at the side hustle, what I was doing. Now, that business is another story, but the system that ran alongside it. Now, the business was network marketing. And everybody knows what network marketing is. It's like you introduce another person, and then you build a network of people, and you get rewarded for building that network of people and making that huge turnover and bonuses, and then you can set yourself free because essentially that system will eventually run itself. So I went down that road, but the thing I was introduced to was the most important point was actually the system that ran alongside it. It was actually books to read. It was mentors to mentor you for free. How is that possible? Millionaires and people that are retired at 25 years old and 30 years old are going to mentor poor Jim. It's like, I've got nothing. All I've done is paid for a kit for 50 quid to join this system. And it's like, all I'm doing is paying £2.50 for a tape who've actually got professional speakers speaking on it. And then, functions that were 50 quid to go to. I'm talking for a major function for a weekend, 50 quid for that. And then even at the local function at the Caird Hall that they had with maybe 1,000 people in the room, I was going to them for £10 a pop. And it's like, at that time, I was going, I can't afford £10. And the guy was going, you can't afford not to afford £10
Yeah.
because you need this information. It's the most important ththing. So it was a wrestle in my mind about this. I can't afford £2.50 for a tape. But the guys used to say to me, well, what happens if something bursts tomorrow? What happens if your shower doesn't work tomorrow? Oh, just get somebody to fix it. Well,
because you would find a way.
Where did you find the money to fix that shower then? You've got me there, haven't you? I've obviously got the money. And that's when they said to me, well, people find the money for things they want to do, don't they?
Yeah.
And this is why I was taught all these lessons in this. So it taught me how to change my thinking. It taught me how to set goals. It taught me how to take action. And it taught me how to get results. I mean, I had some fantastic mentors, as I said, we were financially free, and they'll teach me how to become successful and provide me with a blueprint to success. Why would someone want to help me become successful? I'd lived my whole life competing with everyone. And here I'm in a system now, and I've seen everyone as my enemy because that's how I've been brought up. You know, you've got to compete against these people, and these people, you can't get them come first. That's how I was always taught. And it took me a lot of time to get over that in my thinking, that actually other people were out there to help me succeed. And then my friend explained to me, that actually got introduced to me to this system. That friend is actually Anthony Craig, who is now a counsellor, a Labour counsellor, by the way, in Glenrothes. Actually, fantastic guy. So Anthony actually introduced me to this because he was involved as well. And we actually went together in this and worked hand in hand with each other. So he actually explained to me at the time, well, I can't become successful without helping you become successful. And I still use the system today when we teach other people. Mm-hmm. It's like the more people I teach in order to become successful, the more successful we become as a result, aren't we?
Yeah.
And then they tend to use us as a letting agent, don't they?
Yeah, of course.
So why would I not want to teach people how to become successful?
I think, and as you do teach people, like we do on the Wealth Creation Show and things, you demonstrate obviously the knowledge that you've got to help them obviously achieve their goals as well. I know there's some investors and things that I know are watching just now who would vouch for that. So yeah. It's a two-way thing.
So they started to teach me about passive income.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with property, by the way. They just taught me about passive income, royalties, compounding wealth, all the sources of income that can be generated alongside a day-to-day job while you're still continuing to do it. So, some of the first books I read is The Magic of Thinking Big, is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which we've read time and time again out through all these years. And this is 35 years ago, remember. The other one is Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, which I've read almost 50 times.
Really? Is that many times you've read that book?
Aye, that is the Bible for compounding wealth and passive income. That is an amazing book, and I recommend it to anybody. And then all the opportunities that came. Now, at that time, I was used to going to functions and all the rest of it at a cheap cost. But see, at that time, we were paying hundreds, if not thousands of pounds to go to functions like this in the business world. And I was getting this for 50 quid and 20 quid and everything. And it's like in tapes for £2. I've still even got these tapes today. And now
I've still got some of the CDs you've passed on to me for listening in the car and things.
I mean, I've listened to all these things every single time, and I still listen to them over and over again, and I still remember all these people I actually had.
Gary's asking what that title was again. That's Think and Grow Rich,
Napoleon Hill, Gary. So Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, the best book you'll ever read on compounding wealth. It is the Bible.
Yeah,
everybody will say that. Other ones are as well as classic example is the Robert Kiyosaki one as well. I can't remember what it's called, but the initial Robert Kiyosaki book, which is about compounding wealth as well. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's the one.
Yeah.
But I actually met Rich Dad at some point in time, and he mentored me as well. Not Kiyosaki, but Keith Cunningham. It also taught me things like the laws of attraction. I mean, have you ever felt this way? Suddenly out of the blue that you wanted something so badly, it actually happened. And it did. And yet you'd been thinking about it for ages. And what you think about the most actually happens. And if you think negative thoughts, you'll get negative outcomes. So if you think about positive, you'll get positive outcomes. And literally it is that simple. And it's us that complicate it most of the time. That's what I began to realise. We get in the way of ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, remember the landlord that was literally taking money for nothing? Well, it got me to thinking, and I started to look into property investment at the same time. I have to admit, again, I was fearful, but then I learned from my college days in 1988 that action leads to results, and if the numbers made sense, I should just feel the fear and do it anyway. See how that programming's taken place. Now, remember, this is almost over 5 or 6 years after I've actually in college. So remember, college has gone first, which is 3 years, and then I've got into industry, and then I've got another 2 or 3 years there. So I've got about 5 years there, and then I'm in industry, and then I've got to learn all this from network marketing, from the business that ran alongside in the books and tapes and functions. So I'm going to functions in Birmingham, and we've got 50,000 people in an arena in this organization. And we're listening to speakers like Frank Dick, the coach for the England rugby team. We're listening to speakers like Sir Ranulph Fiennes, the famous explorer and mountaineer. We're listening to other speakers like Will Carling at the time, who was hugely successful. This was another insight into the media, because the weekend that they said that Will Carling was with Princess Diana, he was actually with us at the function. So I began to realise, and the penny started to drop, the media actually lies openly, and they don't care what they say as long as they get a headline.
Yeah.
So it was a real early lesson for me, in order to get again reinforcing for me every single time about facts. Now, was this easy? No, it never was. I had to literally cold call people and make myself do that from a friends list. I used to have to make a list of my friends. See how that is for property investment, how people are phoning their friends to invest in with them and get funding and financing. Well, that's how I started in network marketing. We had to phone people to show them the plan, what was the business opportunity, get them round to our house, show them the plan, and we had to show them the plan. So this was something that's completely foreign to me. And again, I was completely, for an introvert, it was completely out of my comfort zone. I was literally sometimes in absolute tears before I went on the phone. Now, other people out there have probably felt like that as well. But remember, I was always taught to build the reward higher than the actual pain. So therefore, you see the reward before you see the pain, and you feel the fear and do it anyway. If you've got nothing compelling you, driving you forward, then you will never do it. This is the lessons I've learned and what I'm doing out of the business mentors I've actually had. Was it easy? Absolutely not. There was times I literally was rocking back and forward in the corner like I was in an asylum, because I was forcing myself to think differently, and I was forcing myself in my comfort zone all the time. And I literally couldn't take it mentally for that reason. But I knew I had to do this. This was all or nothing, Monte Carlo or bust. I am not coming back for this. I am going to go for it. That's my mindset, and that's how I was. So it was never easy. It absolutely wasn't. So I understand what it's like for anyone getting out of their comfort zone. But what I learned is that when you're feeling uncomfortable, remember, when you're feeling uncomfortable, you've got to celebrate that, because that's when you're growing, and it's the only way things will change. So if you feel uncomfortable when you're doing something, celebrate it, because you're doing something for the first time, and you will then succeed. Doing the same thing day in, day out and being comfortable with it will only reach you to the exact same position you are at right now. If you need to get somewhere else, you have to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's so important to push yourself out with your comfort zone on a regular basis.
Easier said than done, isn't it, though?
It's easier said than done. But I've learned that, obviously, sometimes the hard way. But you do need to push yourself outside your comfort zone.
So it's feeling the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Now, what you have to remember at this point in time, and the term buy to let would not exist when I first started until another 3 years. There was no path to follow, as no one had really gone before me that had systematized the process. And this is where my accountancy and my systematizing skills, my systematic skills came into, and manufacturing came into fruition. I knew a guy called Jim Stevenson. Now, Jim's actually a director at East Fife Football Club. Now, Jim, I met on a course who actually had the national at Lower Methil. He was trying to sell them at that time. And I says, well, why do you no rent them? And then he ended up renting them, and Jim's got them still today.
Yeah.
But he came before me, and he was a blueprint and somebody for me to ask all the time, well, what did you do here, Jim? Because the local authority is not allowing this to be passed or this payment to be paid. What did you do? So I was actually able to get in touch with him. Now, Jim admits now that I just took over and actually accelerated the whole process and actually went way beyond what he did. But if it wasn't for Jim, actually, I don't think I'd actually been able to succeed.
You wouldn't have been able to kind of propel yourself. Yeah.
Hi, Jim was like, stuff it, just go and do it. You know, it's like, just get on with it and do it. This is what you do, and this is how you do it. Great. And then when I found something out, I would then phone him up and go, this is what I did, Jim. And he would phone me up, and then we'd bounce each other off, off each other, and get actually and actually tried and tested system to test how it would work. I mean, I tested each process to get the outcome I wanted. I took the plunge before I bought my first property, and I proved myself to it work because I actually advertised in the paper before I'd even bought a property.
Yeah.
To see if it would actually get any demand for it. And then when I got demand for it, I went, I'm going to buy a property. And I bought it. And then I got it rented. And I knew exactly what I was going to get, knew the tenant I was going to get, because I'd actually pre-cursored it. I premeditated it all.
Yeah.
So it started to work, and I genuinely, and this will probably be the end, and this will be the next chapter of my story. Genuinely, it started to work for me, Richard, and I was started buying property like it was going out of fashion. And it's like, oh my God, it's like I just rolled the dice on the Monopoly table. And it's like I started going hell for leather. And this next week, we will talk about how I started getting all the finance together and where I started getting it from, and how I was able to manipulate the system to the way I wanted to manipulate it to. Incidentally, this morning, for months and months or years and years, I've been sitting looking at this wee statement about I'm on a variable rate with the Bank of Scotland, and I thought my loan to value is not going to work because my loan to value at this point in time is going to be 90% still. Did you know I went onto the Bank of Scotland and looked that up after about 3 or 4 years? I actually seen that on the statement every single time. And you can look at your mortgage options. I looked up and they said, oh, we can give you a new mortgage. We didn't ask for a new valuation or anything.
Really?
Hello? And I've been sitting all this time on variable rate, being an absolute fortune. You don't get unless you ask. And this is my point. This is how I started to prove the system in the beginning. And this is how I've fallen foul of it right now for this very reason. So anybody out there at this point in time thinks they've not got the right loan to value to get a new mortgage product and they're stuck on variable rate, for God's sake, inquire with your bank, because they'll probably not ask you for a new valuation because your mortgage was probably from a valuation 15 years ago, and they'll automatically think it's gone up anyway. They'll not ask for the valuation. They don't actually get a specialist out anymore. They just put them on a new rate. They're going to put me on from 7.5 to 5.1. And yet their new rates now are 6.5 when they're
I was going to say,
and they're 5-year fixed rate deals. Hello.
That's good.
So guess what I'm doing this afternoon? But that's only 3 of them, Richard. So I wasn't really worried too much about that. But it's gone up so much now. I thought I'm going to pay them off. And then I looked at it and went, no, I'm not going to pay them off. Actually, that's 150 grand I'm going to pay off. I'm going to just phone them up and see what these mortgage options are. And then I realised that I was able to do that. Hello. So this is my message to everybody at the end of this. You do not get unless you ask. If you don't ask, you'll never get. Learn the lessons, what I've learned so far from the first part, the second part, and this part today.
Yeah.
When the dream's big enough, the facts don't count. If you've got your dream big enough, you will find a solution for everything, no matter what. I'll guarantee you that. But you have to have that dream so big and think so big that you'll never, ever... a dream, it'll just blow your mind, right? And even a dream, if you've got a dream and you think, yeah, I'm probably going to achieve that, it's no big enough. You need to have something. It is way beyond what you think. I never in a million years... Well, I kind of thought at some point in time I might be a millionaire. When I retired, Richard, when I retired at 65-year-old, that was my plan, to be a millionaire when I retired at 65. And I said, my thought process was, if I was not a millionaire by the time I was 65, I deserved the poverty I got. That's who I thought. And then I couldn't believe, well, we'll talk about it. Everybody knows I was millionaire when I retired, but I'll talk about that process next in next week's episode. I think that's an important point. If anybody's got any questions about that for next week's episode, please feel free to ask. Because now we're going to talk about numbers. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about how you generate that, where you're going to get it from, how you're going to prove the system, how you're going to get through the system, how you're going to get to the next stage. That is next week's episode.
Just going to say that's going to be a good episode, Jim, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of you. That, like you say, the figures and the money side of it. That's brought us to a really good point to finish off today. Thanks for taking us through that journey, Jim. And next week's show, next Monday, 12:30, we will be doing the fourth instalment. So I will see